Imagine a scenario that is pretty much every pilot's nightmare.
Okay.
It's a foggy afternoon, visibility is dropping to basically zero, and you have a 51-year-old man flying a light aircraft home from a business trip.
Not a good combination.
No. And things go wrong, mechanical issues start to cascade, and he's forced to make a crash landing in a plowed field.
Oh, wow.
The plane comes down hard. It digs in and stops abruptly on its nose. It is a violent, high-velocity impact.
That is terrifying setup, and biologically, the deceleration forces involved there they're just immense.
Exactly. So the pilot is thrown from the cockpit.
Yeah.
By the time the emergency team scramble to the site, he's unconscious.
Right.
They rush him to the nearest trauma center, and the doctors immediately clock a massive problem. He is in severe hypovolemic shock.
Okay, so his pressure's dropping fast.
His blood pressure is tanking, his heart rate is thready and racing.
Yeah.
He has lost a massive amount of blood. But here is the mystery, and this is really the hook for our entire discussion today.
Yeah.
There is no external hemorrhage.
So he's not bleeding out onto the gurney?
He isn't bleeding onto the floor.
So the tank is empty, but there's no leak in the hull that anyone can see from the outside.
Precisely. They strip him for the trauma survey. He has extensive bruising across his lower abdomen. His pelvis looks physically distorted. It's prominent on the right side. And then a single chilling detail. There is a tiny drop of blood at the external orifice of the penis.
Oof. Yeah. To a trauma surgeon, that single drop is screaming a warning. It changes the entire algorithm of the resuscitation.
It does. The doctors are scrambling. Why is he in shock? Why did the urethra tear? And the answer isn't just, he hit the ground hard. The answer lies in the very specific, hidden, and frankly treacherous architecture of the pelvic walls. It's about understanding what lies beneath the surface.
This is actually a classic case study straight from the pages of Snell's Clinical Anatomy, and it is the perfect entry point for what we're doing today.
It really is.
That patient's life didn't depend on the doctors knowing the Latin names of the bones. It depended on them understanding that the pelvis is a rigid ring lined with incredibly fragile, high-volume plumbing.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are opening up one of the heavy hitters. We are interpreting and analyzing the chapter on the pelvis, pelvic walls, from Snell's Clinical Anatomy.
A fantastic chapter.
We're going to solve the mystery of that pilot. But to do it, we have to reconstruct the human basin from the ground up.
I love this topic because the pelvis is, it's really the engineering masterpiece of the human body. It's the crossroads where the spine meets the legs, where the digestive system meets the outside world, and where new life has to navigate a very tight obstacle course.
Before we start building this structure, I want to state our mission clearly. We have read the source material, Snell's Clinical Anatomy, so you don't have to wade through the dense text alone.
Right.
But we aren't just reading it to you. We are interpreting it. We're looking for the Blinkist level insights, the mechanisms that make the facts stick.
Think of this as a high-level revision tool or a ready reckoner. But I will add a caveat here.
Please do.
Anatomy is a visual art. It really is. We can give you the mental anchors, the metaphors, and the logic, but we want this conversation to be the movie trailer that convinces you to go buy the ticket.
I like that. The movie trailer.
Yeah. You need to open the book and look at the diagrams to truly cement this stuff. Reading is, it's becoming a lost art, and we are hopeful this discussion makes you curious enough to crack the spine of the actual textbook.
Fair enough. Let's start with the geography. When we use the word pelvis, most people just think of hips. But what does the word actually mean?
It's Latin. Pelvis literally translates to basin.
A basin, like a bowl.
And if you look at a skeleton, that's exactly what it is. It's a bowl-shaped bony structure that connects the trunk to the lower limbs. But unlike a kitchen bowl, this isn't one solid piece of ceramic. It's a composite structure.
Right, it's a puzzle. Break down the pieces for us.
Okay, so you have 4 distinct bones that come together to form this basin. On the sides and front, you have the 2 hip bones, anatomically known as the os coxae.
Okay.
Then, closing off the back wall, you have the sacrum and the tiny coccyx dangling off the end.
And those hip bones themselves are a bit of a deception, right? Because in an adult, they look solid, but they start out as separate pieces.
Correct. If you look at a pediatric x-ray, the hip bone looks like it's floating in pieces. It's actually 3 separate bones. The ilium, the ischium, and the pubis.
Right.
The ilium is the big flared wing you feel at your waist. The ischium is the hard, bony loop you are sitting on right now.
The sit bone.
The sit bone, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the pubis is the strut in the front. They are all joined by cartilage at what's called the triradiate cartilage within the hip socket, the acetabulum.
And around puberty, they They fuse into one solid rock.
Exactly. They fuse to withstand the immense weight transfer of walking. It's a really critical developmental step.
Now, Snell makes a very sharp distinction that I've always found a bit confusing. He separates the true pelvis from the false pelvis. To me, a pelvis is a pelvis. How can one be false?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer, but functionally it's a crucial distinction. It helps to visualize the pelvis as a funnel.
Okay, I'm picturing a funnel. Wide at the top, narrow at the bottom.
You got it. So you have the wide, flared part at the very top. That is the false pelvis. It's bordered by the lumbar vertebrae in the back and those flared iliac wings on the sides.
Okay.
But here's why it's false. It doesn't contain pelvic organs. It holds up the intestines. It's really just the basement of the abdominal cavity. It has no obstetric function. It's just a container.
And the narrow spout of the funnel.
That is the true pelvis. The line that separates the wide top from the narrow tube is called the pelvic brim, or the pelvic inlet.
This brim seems to be a vital landmark. If I'm looking at a skeleton, how do I trace it?
Imagine running your finger from the big, bony prominence at the top of the sacrum, that's the sacral promontory, around the side, along a ridge called the arcuate line, all the way to the top of the pubic bone in the front.
So it's a complete circle of bone.
It's a complete bony ridge. That is the pelvic brim. Anything below that line is the danger zone. That's the true pelvis.
Why danger zone?
Because that's where the space gets tight. That's where the bladder, rectum, and reproductive organs are packed in. And most importantly, that is the rigid, bony canal that a baby must navigate during birth.
Oh, okay.
It has an inlet at the top, an outlet at the bottom, and a curved cavity in between. Everything important happens in the true pelvis.
That brings us to one of the most critical clinical concepts in this entire chapter.
Yeah.
We talked about the bones, but we need to talk about the physics of the structure. You mentioned earlier that the pelvis is a rigid ring.
Yes. This is the concept that saves lives in the trauma bay. It's not an exaggeration.
So explain the pretzel anchor.
Okay. Visualize a hard, dry pretzel ring. You know, the classic circle shape. It's a continuous, rigid circle.
Got it.
If you take that pretzel and you snap it in just one place, what happens to the overall shape of the pretzel?
Well, it holds its shape. It might have a crack, but it doesn't fall apart or distort because the rest of the ring is holding it in place.
Exactly. It remains stable. The integrity of the ring is maintained by the intact bone on the other side.
Okay.
But if you snap that pretzel in two places, or if you snap it in one place and break a joint on the other side,
The whole section comes loose. It becomes a free-floating segment.
precisely, it becomes unstable, and the pelvis behaves exactly the same way. It is a rigid ring of bone.
So a single fracture.
If you have a fracture in just one spot, say a patient falls and breaks the superior pubic ramus on the left, the pelvis is usually stable. It won't shift. You can often manage that with bed rest and pain control.
But if the ring is disrupted in two places,
Then you have a nightmare, because the pelvis isn't just sitting there. It has massive muscles attached to it. The abdominal muscles pull up, the back muscles pull up.
right?
If a segment of that ring is floating free, those muscles will spasm and physically pull that loose chunk of bone upward.
And since the leg is attached to that bone,
The leg moves up with it. You get a physical shortening of the limb and a massive deformation of the pelvic volume. This is often called an open book fracture or vertical shear, depending on the force.
so when we see a patient with a pelvic fracture, the first question isn't, is it broken? It's, is the ring intact?
Exactly. Stability is everything. Everything hinges on that question.
Let's do a quick check-in to make sure this landed. Listener, picture this. You have a patient in the ER. The X-ray shows a clean fracture of the superior pubic ramus and the inferior pubic ramus on the same side.
Okay.
The back of the pelvis, the sacrum, and SI joints are totally fine. Is this pelvis likely stable or unstable?
Think about the pretzel. Where are the breaks?
The answer is stable. Even though there are two breaks, they are on the same segment, essentially acting as one break in the arch. The posterior arch is intact.
The ring hasn't opened up.
Exactly. If you got that, you're thinking like an orthopedic surgeon. If not, maybe just rewind 30 seconds and listen to the pretzel part again.
Now, we need to correct a visual misconception. We've been talking about the pelvis as a basin or a funnel, but almost every skeleton you see hanging in a classroom is hanging wrong.
Oh, yeah. How so? They usually hang straight up and down, right? Like the pelvis is a bucket sitting flat on the floor.
Right, and that is anatomically incorrect. It's a lie. We need to understand the tilt.
Okay, so if I am standing in perfect posture, how is my pelvis actually oriented?
The text gives us a very specific geometric definition. If you are standing up straight, the anterior superior iliac spine,
The ASIS.
the ASIS, yes, that's the bony point on the front of your hip belt line. That point and the front of the symphysis pubis, your pubic bone, should be in the same vertical plane.
Okay, that is hard to visualize just hearing it. Give me a physical anchor.
Okay. Imagine you have a detached pelvis bone in your hands. You walk up to a flat vertical wall. To place that pelvis in the correct anatomical position against the wall, the pointy part of the hip, the ASIS, and the front of the pubic bone must touch the wall at the exact same time.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm picturing that. That means the pelvis is tilted significantly forward.
Way forward. It means the basin isn't holding water, it's tipping it out the front. The pelvic inlet faces forward and upward, not straight up like a chimney.
This must have huge implications for our internal organs.
It does. It means the weight of the abdominal organs, the intestines, the stomach, isn't resting directly on the pelvic floor muscles.
It's resting on the bone in front.
It's resting partially on the pubic bones and the lower abdominal wall.
So the tilt actually offloads the pelvic floor.
Exactly. If we didn't have that tilt, gravity would be pushing our viscera straight through our pelvic floor all day long. The tilt is a protective mechanism. It's brilliant.
That is a fascinating insight. It's engineering again. Now, speaking of engineering, we have to address the elephant in the room. The differences between biological males and biological females.
Form follows function. That is the golden rule of anatomy. The male pelvis and the female pelvis have different jobs, so they are built differently. It's as simple as that.
Okay, break it down. What is the design brief for the male pelvis?
The male pelvis is built for strength, leverage, and speed. Historically and biologically, it's designed for heavy lifting and locomotion, so it's heavier. The bones are thicker.
You can see the difference on an X-ray.
Oh yeah, it has more prominent markings and ridges because the muscles attached to it are exerting more force.
And the shape of the inlet, the top of that true pelvis.
It's heart-shaped.
Heart-shaped, that sounds romantic.
It's actually obstructive. It's heart-shaped because the sacral promontory pushes deep forward into the inlet. The false pelvis is deep and funnel-like. The cavity is narrow, it's efficient for transferring weight, but it's a terrible shape for passing a baby.
Which brings us to the female pelvis.
The female pelvis has the toughest job in human biology. It's a real paradox. It has to be strong enough to walk and run upright, which requires a narrow stance for efficiency.
Right, for biomechanics.
Cool, but it also has to pass a full-term human fetus with a very large brain.
This is the obstetric dilemma. I've heard that term before.
Exactly. It's a tug of war between biomechanics and reproduction. So the female pelvis is lighter, it's wider, it's shallower. The cavity is more cylindrical, not a funnel. And the inlet isn't heart-shaped, it's transversely oval.
Wider side to side.
Exactly. It's designed to maximize volume.
Now, Snell brings up a classification system by Caldwell and Malloy that I found really interesting. It turns out not every woman has the classic female pelvis.
No, and this is vital for obstetrics. You can't assume anatomy. The classic female shape we just described is called the gynecoid pelvis.
Gynecoid, like woman-shaped.
Exactly. It's round, roomy, and perfect for birth. About 41% of women have this shape.
But that leaves nearly 60% who don't.
Right, and this is where it gets clinically interesting. The next most common is the android pelvis.
Android meaning man-like.
Correct. It's that heart-shaped inlet we see in males, but occurring in females.
Huh?
About 33% of white females and 16% of black females have this shape.
And clinically, this is the one to watch out for.
It's high risk. Because of that heart shape, the back part of the inlet is narrow. It acts like a wedge. As the baby descends, the head can get stuck in that narrow posterior segment. This causes dystocia or difficult labor. The head just arrests. It stops moving down.
So if a woman has an android pelvis, she is biologically fighting an uphill battle for a vaginal delivery.
Often, yes. It's a common indication for C-section due to failure to progress. Then you have the anthropoid pelvis, which is long and narrow oval-shaped front to back.
Like an ape?
Yeah, common in non-human primates, hence the name. And finally, the rare platyploid pelvis, which is flat.
Like a platter.
Exactly. Wide sideways, but very narrow front to back. Only about 2% of women have that. In that case, the baby's head might not even engage in the inlet.
Let's do a quick check-in for the listener. Think back to the shapes. Which of the four pelvic types is most likely to cause obstruction during labor because of a heart-shaped inlet that narrows the posterior space?
Was it gynecoid, android, anthropoid, or platyploid?
The answer is android. If you remember that, you're understanding the mechanics of the birth canal. It's all about the geometry.
Yeah, let's move from the bones themselves to the walls. We have this bony ring, but if you look at a skeleton, there are huge gaps. The pelvis isn't a solid bucket, it has holes.
Right. Snell breaks it down into anterior, posterior, and lateral walls.
The anterior wall is actually quite boring. It's shallow. It's basically just the backs of the pubic bones and the symphysis pubis.
Not much to it.
It holds the weight of the bladder, but that's about it.
The posterior wall is the substantial one.
Very deep. That's the curve of the sacrum and coccyx. It's about 15 centimeters of curved bone forming a roof over the back of the cavity.
Now, Snell poses a physics question regarding this wall that I loved. We are standing upright. Gravity is pushing our spine down onto the sacrum. The sacrum is triangular. It's a wedge.
Sure.
Why doesn't the weight of the spine just pit the sacrum forward? Why doesn't it just rotate the bottom of the sacrum up and the top down, snapping the joint?
It's a great engineering question. The force of the spine wants to rotate the sacrum. To stop that, we have two massive, incredibly strong ligaments. The sacrotuberous ligament and the sacrospinous ligament.
I like the guy rope analogy here.
It's perfect. Imagine the sacrum is a tent pole that wants to tip over. These ligaments attach to the bottom of the sacrum and the coccyx, and they anchor it to the sturdy hip bone, specifically the istal tuberosity in spine.
So they hold the bottom down. They're like anchor cables.
They are the brakes. They prevent that upward rotation of the tailbone. Without them, your spine would collapse into your pelvis every time you jumped.
And these ligaments do double duty. They don't just stabilize, they create architecture.
Right. The hip bone has these two big notches carved out of the back. The greater sciatic notch and the lesser sciatic notch. They're just open gaps in the bone.
Okay.
When you stretch these ligaments across those notches, you seal them off. You turn them into tunnels.
Tunnels, or foramina.
Exactly. The greater sciatic foramen becomes the main exit door from the pelvis into the buttock, the gluteal region. That's where the sciatic nerve escapes.
The big one. And the lesser sciatic foramen.
That's the entrance to the perineum. It's a smaller door below, so the ligaments are stabilizers and architects.
Now, we need to address these walls. The text mentions a sandwich concept regarding the muscles. This helped me visualize where everything sits.
Yes. The bony pelvis isn't just naked bone. It is the meat in a sandwich. You have the bone in the middle, on the inside of the pelvis, lining the walls like wallpaper. You have muscles, specifically the obturator internus on the side and the piriformis on the back.
And on the outside.
You have the gluteal muscles covering the exterior.
So the bone is sandwiched between muscle layers. And where do the nerves and vessels run?
They usually run between the inner muscle layer and the fascia. They are tucked away, protected, which is, pretty good design feature.
Let's look down now. The floor. If the pelvis is a basin, it needs a bottom so the contents don't fall out.
And this is where people, even students, get confused. They often visualize the pelvic floor as a flat trampoline stretched taut across the bottom of the ring.
Is that wrong? It feels kind of intuitive.
It is completely wrong. It is not flat. It is a gutter.
A gutter. Okay, explain that.
The pelvic floor is formed by the pelvic diaphragm, which consists of the levator ani muscles and the small coccygeus muscle. These muscles originate from the side walls and slip downward and medially.
Towards the middle.
Yes. They meet in the middle to form a rapha, or seam.
So it's like a hammock or maybe the hull of a boat sloping down towards the center.
Correct. And this shape is absolutely vital for two things: holding your insides in and getting a baby out.
Let's talk about holding things in first. The sphincter action.
Okay, there is a specific part of the levator ani called the puborectalis. It's a U-shaped loop of muscle.
A sling.
A sling, perfect word. It starts at the pubis, loops right around the back of the junction between the rectum and the anal canal, and goes back to the pubis.
Snell uses a great analogy here. Think of a garden hose.
Yes. Imagine you have a garden hose with water running through it. If you want to stop the water without a valve, what do?
You kink the hose. You bend it sharply.
The puborectalis is the hand that kinks the hose. It pulls the rectum forward, creating what we call the anorectal angle. As long as that hose is kinked, you are continent. The stool cannot pass.
And when you sit down to go to the bathroom,
you relax that muscle. The sling loosens, the rectum straightens out, the hose unkinks, and gravity and abdominal pressure can do their work.
That is simple and brilliant mechanics. But what about the second function, the obstetric rotation? How does this gutter shape help the baby?
This is fascinating 3D geometry. The baby's head is oval. The entrance to the pelvis, the inlet, is oval sideways. So the baby enters the pelvis looking sideways, left or right.
Okay, so the head is sideways.
But the exit of the pelvis is oval, front to back. The baby can't come out sideways, it won't fit.
So the baby has to turn 90 degrees while inside the tunnel.
Exactly. And it's the shape of the pelvic floor muscles, that sloping gutter, that forces the head to rotate. When the leading part of the baby's head hits that muscle floor, it slides down the slope and rotates forward until the back of the head is under the pubic bone.
So the muscle isn't just a passive floor, it's a rifled barrel. It's a guidance system.
It's an active structural guidance system. Without that gutter shape, the head wouldn't rotate and birth would stop.
But as with everything in medicine, things can go wrong. The text talks about pelvic floor injury.
Yes, childbirth is traumatic for these muscles. The levator ani can tear or overstretch. If that support system fails, gravity wins.
What does that look like clinically?
It looks like prolapse. The uterus can drop down into the vagina because the floor isn't holding it up. The bladder can bulge into the vagina. That's called a cystosol.
Right.
Or you lose that kink in the hose we talked about.
Stress incontinence.
Right. You cough, intra-abdominal pressure goes up, the floor doesn't hold the kink, and you leak urine. It all comes back to the structural integrity of that muscular gutter.
Okay, we've built the walls, we've laid the floor. Now we need to wire the house and put in the plumbing. The nerves and vessels.
Let's start with the wiring, the sacral plexus.
This sits on the posterior wall, right?
Yes, right in front of the curiformis muscle. It's a web of nerves coming out of the sacral foramina.
And two big players come out of here.
The celebrity is the sciatic nerve. It's the largest nerve in the body, about as thick as your thumb. It gathers fibers from L4 to S3 and heads straight out that greater sciatic foramen we mentioned down to the leg.
The text mentions a specific issue with the sciatic nerve during pregnancy.
Yes. Because the nerve sits right against the back wall of the pelvis, a baby's head pressing down can literally squash the nerve against the bone.
And the mom feels that in her leg.
Sciatica-like symptoms, pain shooting down the back of the leg, even though the problem is in the pelvis, it's a compression injury.
What about the other nerve, the pudendal nerve?
This is the nerve of the perineum. It has a famous root value mnemonic. S2, S3, S4 keeps the poo off the floor.
That is vivid, but effective. I'll never forget that.
It supplies the anal sphincter and the genitals. Its path is crazy. It leaves the pelvis through the greater sciatic foramen, loops around the sacrocemenous ligament, and comes right back in through the lesser sciatic foramen.
It exits just to enter again. Why?
It's navigating around the guy ropes of the ligaments to get to the perineum safely. Clinically, this is vital because if a woman is in labor, we can inject anesthetic right around that ligament to block the pain.
A pudendal block.
That's the one. We're targeting the nerve on that specific part of its journey.
Now the plumbing. The arteries.
The main water main is the internal iliac artery. It dives down into the pelvis and splits.
Anterior and posterior division.
Right. The anterior division is for the organs. It supplies the bladder, the uterus, the rectum. The posterior division is for the walls and the buttock, the gluteal arteries.
But now we have to go back to the beginning. We have to go back to our pilot lying in the field in shock with no external bleeding.
We entered the danger zone.
We talked about the arteries, but Snell makes a huge point about the veins, the internal iliac veins.
This is the answer to the mystery. The arteries are thick-walled, muscular tubes. They are tough. They can take a hit. But the veins, the pelvic veins, are thin-walled. They are valveless. They are fragile. And crucially, they lie directly against the hard, bony walls of the pelvis.
So when our pilot crashed?
The impact caused a fracture in his pelvic ring. We talked about the rigid ring. It broke. Snell mentions a linear fracture through the lateral part of the sacrum.
And that sharp fractured bone is sitting right next to those thin engorged veins.
Exactly. It's like a knife next to a water balloon. It tears them like tissue paper. The blood pours out.
But not onto the ground.
No. It pours into the loose connective tissue behind the peritoneum, the retroperitoneal space.
And because that space is loose, there is nothing to tamponade or stop the bleeding.
Correct. You can lose liters of blood into that space before enough pressure builds up to stop it. That is the retroperitoneal hematoma. That's why he was in hypovolemic shock. That's why his pelvis was prominent on one side. It was physically filled with a massive volume of blood.
And the drop of blood at the penis.
The shearing force that broke the bone also tore the urethra where it passes through the pelvic floor. The whole structure was disrupted.
Wow. It really highlights why you can't just look at the surface. You have to know what lies beneath.
Absolutely. A pelvic fracture is a vascular emergency until proven otherwise. The bones aren't the killer. The veins are.
I want to throw one more scenario at you before we wrap up. This is a fictional case, but based on the minor pelvic fractures section of the text. Let's call it the gymnast's pop.
I'm listening. Sounds painful.
Picture a 17-year-old sprinter or gymnast. She is in the starting blocks. The gun goes off. She explodes out of the block's maximum power. Suddenly, she feels a loud POP and searing pain in the front of her hip. She collapses.
A classic history. I see this in the clinic.
She hasn't been hit by a car. She hasn't fallen. She just ran. What happened?
This is an avulsion fracture.
Which means?
It means the muscle was stronger than the bone. In teenagers, the tendons are incredibly strong, but the growth plates on the bones haven't fully ossified yet. They're still a bit soft.
The weak link in the chain.
Exactly. The muscle contracted so violently that it ripped the piece of bone it was attached to right off the pelvis.
That is intense. So let's play a game. I want to ask you, the expert, and you, the listener, to match the muscle to the bone it ripped off.
Let's do it.
Scenario A. The pain is on the very point of the hip, the anterior superior iliac spine, the ASIS. Which muscle pulled it off?
That would be the sartorius muscle. It attaches right there. That's his origin point.
Scenario B. The pain is a bit lower at the anterior inferior iliac spine, the AIS.
That's the rectus femoris, the big quad muscle, specifically the straight head. That's a very common one in soccer players who kick a ball hard.
Scenario C. This one is painful. The pain is deep in the buttock, right on the sit bone, the ischial tuberosity. Usually happens to hurdlers.
That is the hamstrings. They all originate from the ischial tuberosity. If you kick your leg up high and fast, you can rip that bone right off.
It's a literal tug of war, and the bone loses.
It shows just how much force these muscles generate. It's really quite amazing.
We have covered a massive amount of ground, from plane crashes to sprinting injuries, from gutters to funnels. Let's wrap this up with a summary of our key anchors.
Okay, let's simplify it into 4 takeaways. 1, the rigid ring.
The pelvis works like a pretzel. Break it once, it's usually stable.
Break it twice, it's unstable and dangerous. 2, the tilt.
The pelvis isn't a flat bucket, it's tilted forward. ASIS aligns with the symphysis pubis vertically.
3, the floor is a gutter.
It slopes down and forward to rotate the baby, and is supported by the kinked toes of the puberectalis for continence.
And 4, the hidden bleed. The pelvic veins are thin, fragile, and lie next to sharp bone. Fracture equals bleeding.
Perfect. And I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought. We talked about the shapes, gynecoid, android, etc. Snell mentions that these variations exist. But think about the evolutionary pressure here.
You mean the obstetric dilemma we touched on?
Yes, humans stood up. To walk on 2 legs efficiently, natural selection favored a narrow pelvis. But at the exact same time, our brains got huge, so selection favored a wide pelvis.
We are caught in a biological tug-of-war between efficient walking and surviving childbirth.
Exactly. And the fact that we have 33% of women with android or male-like pelvises, and the fact that birth is so mechanically complex, the rotation, the gutter, it suggests that evolution is still working on us. We are a work in progress. That anatomy isn't perfect design. It's a brilliant but risky compromise.
That is a profound way to look at it. It explains the pathology. It explains why we need doctors to understand this chapter so deeply. Because the margin for error in the pelvis is razor thin.
So, here is your call to action. We've given you the trailer. Now go see the movie. Open Snell's Clinical Anatomy. Find the chapter on the pelvic walls. Look at the diagrams of the fractures. Look at the diagram of the levator ani gutter. Connect these stories to those images.
Reading is where the consolidation happens. Don't skip it.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in part 2, where we explore the contents of the pelvis, the organs themselves.
Until then,
stay curious.